This morning. Well, joining me now to have a further look at today's papers is Sophia Worringer, researcher and political commentator with Young Voices UK. Good morning, Sophia.
Good morning.
Let's start with the vaping ban. On the front of the Times as well this morning, Rishi Sunak expected to announce later that he is pushing ahead with his plan to ban disposable vapes and also to go ahead with this smoking ban for anyone aged 15 and under, essentially gradually phasing out smoking in the UK. What is your view on this? I mean, you've got people like Liz Truss, his predecessor, of course, in Downing Street, calling this a profoundly unconservative policy. And there is a libertarian case to be made against this. And yet a lot of people would say, look, we've got a real issue with the burden that smoking and vaping causes on the NHS. Is this common sense? Where do you stand?
So I do think it is an unconservative thing to ban the whole cohort, a whole generation of people from ever smoking. And it does feel to be the last throes of a government that have run out of money to ban things, because that is obviously a free thing to do and can have a big impact. So I do think Liz Truss is right in that it is unconservative. Whether it's the right thing to do, I guess, is a different question. And I do think that obviously smoking has huge impact on the cost to the NHS. But I do think also so do many other things that we don't ban. And there is an argument that people are allowed to make bad choices for themselves in the same way that they are allowed to drink alcohol or eat unhealthy foods or never move off the sofa. So it seems interesting that they're honing in on this one thing as a thing to ban. And also the crackdown on vaping, which is part of this measure, which will come in particularly aimed at children. That's a different question. But I think when you have adults that are unable to purchase cigarettes, and this is something that will go on through their whole life, it will be very difficult to enforce, because eventually you will have 40-year-olds who can buy cigarettes and 39-year-olds who can't buy cigarettes, and that's completely unenforceable and feels fairly unfair.
Does it make a difference, though, that this is not a ban on people who are currently smoking, which I'm sure would be incredibly politically controversial? I mean, this is a ban on people who currently are not smoking, ever being able to smoke. And given the health risks that we know smoking contains, doesn't that just make sense? I mean, you know, most parents probably don't want their children smoking, so by making sure that they don't have the ability to smoke, isn't that just a way of protecting the NHS long term?
I think it's always nice and easy to ban things for other people, and interesting, the cohort of people that will never be able to smoke under this legislation can't vote at the moment. So there's no way they can make their electoral position known and push back on this implementation of this proposal. Interestingly, the one country that has introduced this ban is New Zealand, and they've actually then rode back on it because, I think, of the practicalities of enforcing it. So yes, there's lots of things we could do to improve the health outcomes of the nation and to lessen the burden on the NHS, but whether they are the right things to do, whether they will actually work, sometimes banning something makes people more likely to buy it. And I imagine there will be an explosion in black market selling of cigarettes to people who are excluded from purchasing cigarettes and other smoking apparatus legally. So it may just push the problem underground.
Yeah, it's a really good point about whether banning stuff works. I mean, the obvious example would be, you know, recreational drugs in this country. Obviously, they're all outlawed, basically, most of them, other than things like alcohol and cigarettes. And yet you still, I mean, you walk down most streets in town and city centres, you can smell cannabis very often. Football matches has always been a massive issue, but it's particularly spiked in recent years with cocaine use. You know, you go into a pub or a club on a weekend, if you look for it, you'll probably see people who are high on coke. The bans there haven't necessarily worked.
Yeah, and I think police resource and attention should be focused on enforcing the things that are already illegal and that have huge harms and have proven harms to the health of the nation. And interestingly, if you then ban cigarettes, there will be people going to dealers for cigarettes who then also potentially may get pulled into harder stuff that is even more harmful, like cannabis and other forms of drugs. So if you create a bigger market for this illegal dealing of substances, people who may have never come into contact with someone who would deal illegal drugs may now well be, because they just want their cigarettes.
Now, page 13 of the Daily Mail this morning carries an interesting story under the headline, Tailor-Made Way to Win the White House. A political endorsement from Taylor Swift could sway the 2024 presidential election in America, polling has found. The survey showed that 18% of voters would be more likely or significantly more likely to vote for a presidential candidate if they are backed by the pop star. I mean, that seems like a huge amount of political influence that Taylor Swift is carrying. Do celebrity endorsements matter? Do they work? Would it sway your vote, Sophia?
I don't think Taylor would sway my vote politically. She would sway my vote on lots of other things. I'm a fan of her music. But interestingly, I think this survey also found, or this poll found, that 17% said they were less likely to vote for a candidate if Taylor Swift had endorsed them. So it seems like it slightly cancels each other out. Exactly. But I do think Taylor is in a unique category in that she's a mega celebrity. I don't think the general kind of run-of-the-mill celebrity would have this impact. And in fact, sometimes celebrities get involved in politics actually puts people off. And I know in the lead up to the Brexit referendum, for example, the Stronger Together campaign coordinated a lot of celebrities to wade in and say that they were going to vote to remain. And I do think that potentially put people off, and it added to the feeling that those who were out of touch and didn't really understand what real life was like and the real hardships that people faced were pushing for something. And it made people think, well, they don't understand my life, so I'm going to disagree with them and maybe go the other way. I would prefer to see Taylor Swift put her political energy and campaigning into taking down the pornography industry. You may have seen recently the AI, the news that the AI generated images of her in a pornographic material. And if she takes on that as a political campaign, I do think that'll be a lot more influential and more helpful for people coming up behind her to understand how harmful and exploitative pornography is to women particularly.
No, completely. That's a really worrying story, but it is interesting in terms of the amount of political influence she seems to have at the moment. I mean, at the risk of offending every millennial woman in my life, do you think there's almost a risk that the deification of Taylor Swift has gone a bit far now, Sophia?
Yeah, she does seem to have not put her foot wrong in terms of how people perceive her. And obviously she's very successful, and she has generated a huge amount of money from her most recent Eras tour, which is, of course, ongoing. I think the issue for Taylor Swift, though, is how long she can continue to be making money and lyrics off failed relationships, and whether she will ever settle down. And obviously her new relationship with Travis Kelce is on everyone's lips and has increased sale tickets for the Chiefs games and has made people who are never interested in that sport tune in potentially to try and see her in the crowd. And I do think maybe we're talking about the UK having a declining fertility rate and America also following similar suit. If Taylor Swift settled down, got married, got pregnant, maybe that would encourage young women to follow suit.
She has so much influence. Yes, quite. Let's do one more story. And we're going to be joined between now and 6 by the nutritionist Amanda Ursel, who's going to talk about something you may have spotted in the papers yesterday. Rishi Sunak fasts for 36 hours straight every week between 5 p.m. on a Sunday and 5 a.m. on a Tuesday, partly because of his Hindu faith, partly because of the health benefits. Obviously, intermittent fasting has become incredibly popular over recent years. Have you ever done intermittent fasting, Sophia?
I have fasted, not to lose weight, to say, just for medical reasons, mainly a few times. And I think this shows incredible self-control from the Prime Minister, and also, as you said, the centrality of his faith to his life. And he's clearly working very hard and getting up very early if he's breaking his fast at 5 a.m. on the Tuesday. But I'm slightly concerned. When I had to fast, I became very hangry and irritable. So I'm hoping he's not making any huge decisions in a rash way during that period, because I do think it impairs your judgment and reduces your energy.
Maybe he banned vaping when he was hangry. Okay.
Exactly. Those kind of policies seem like they might come out of someone who likes to ban things when he's hungry,
Sophia, always appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's Sophia Worringer, researcher and political commentator with Young Voices UK.